Now, to start our afternoon session, first of all, hope you enjoyed the lunch. We have a series of speakers, 7 speakers into our next session, covering various aspects of the industry. Essentially, the session title is Showcasing Best Practice and Developments and Innovations in the Sector. Our first speaker for this section is Siobhan O'Halloran. Siobhan is the Future Networks Manager with Gas Networks Ireland, and she's here to discuss biomethane's role in decarbonised gas networks. Essentially what they're looking at is longer-term vision for transport coming from gas, renewable transport, and in terms of renewable gas in general being used on the grid. So I'd like you to put your hands together here for Siobhan O'Halloran. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate that I am kicking off the graveyard session, so thank you for sticking around. Let's see if we can get things moving. Okay, back a bit. Yes, so I suppose today I'm going to talk through our pathway to a net zero carbon network. And this sets out our vision of how the network can evolve over the coming 20-year period to transport only renewable gases. Given the audience that we have here today, I'll be focusing on the role that biomethane can play and how it'll be supplemented with hydrogen in time. Just to draw your attention to, I suppose, the logo at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we are, I suppose, Gas Networks Ireland are recognised as a UN Sustainable Development Champion by DEC, and where we are aligned with, I suppose, 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. This presentation will step through how we are committed to delivering decarbonisation and clean and affordable energy. So I suppose just giving a sense of the network today, the gas network is really the silent workhorse of the Irish economy. It provides 30% of Ireland's primary energy, and this is split across power generation, heat and transport. And as was highlighted earlier on in the day, it's a network of real scale and value with over 720,000 customers and almost 15,000 kilometres of pipeline. The network, I suppose, is one of the most modern in Europe. It's exceptionally flexible in terms of its configuration and very resilient. And that means it's ideally placed to support our journey towards delivering renewable gases. And as we will demonstrate, this is primarily through the redeployment of our existing assets. So I suppose to have a better understanding how we will approach the decarbonisation journey, it's good to take stock of who are our customers today and where we're getting those sources of demand. So on the right-hand side, we have a breakdown between the types of customers that we have. We have kind of 2 pressure tiers within the network, or high pressure transmission network, and this service, I suppose, primarily our power gen and our large energy users, the likes of those hard to abate customers such as dairies, cement plants, and the like. And what we can see from the charts is that whilst they're a very small cohort of customers, less than 50 in total, they represent the vast majority of our demand. Whereas if we were to look to our distribution customers, they would have 99.9% of our 720,000 customers, but represents roughly 30%. So in terms of decarbonising the network, we are targeting the use of biomethane and hydrogen to the, I suppose, right end users. I'd like to draw your attention at this time as well, just to the sources of our gas. So presently, we import roughly 80% of our gas from the UK via the Moffat entry point. And over the coming decade, indigenous supplies from Carib are anticipated to fall. So without a rapid scale up in renewable gases, with biomethane leading the way, we will just be shifting our energy resilience further and further outside the country. I think it's fair to say that what's been highlighted in the presentations to date is that, there is the ability for biomethane in particular to scale rapidly with the right supports in place. And Denmark is always highlighted as the golden child here by reaching 40% of demand potential within 8 years. So I suppose looking to the future, we have developed our pathway to a net zero carbon network, which we affectionately call Pathways. And this document aims to support Ireland's ambitious climate targets, and doing so in a way that maintains energy security and minimises the overall costs through redeploying existing assets where possible. The gas network is exceptionally flexible, and we recognise that this is one pathway that it can evolve, and I suppose this pathway may change in time in response to changing policy and market dynamics, but we're confident that it is well adapted to suit whatever future we see, be it an entirely green hydrogen and biomethane future, or something supplemented with abated methane or CCS. So I suppose the vision that we're presenting today is how the network will be transitioned over the coming 20 years to transport biomethane and green hydrogen only. We recognise that this may take 20 years. Some of the stages we talk about may take longer or shorter, but the journey is broadly the same in terms of network evolution. One of the themes that is highlighted very much in the terms of future energy system planning is an integrated approach to how we plan our electricity, gas, and in time water networks to facilitate green hydrogen. And what we are confident of from our interactions with IrBEA's is that a gas molecule will be required to support a renewable electricity system into the future. So I suppose just to say that this is a precursor to several more advanced studies that consider adaptive planning practices, and these studies are underway at the moment, and this is our opportunity to kind of get our initial thinking out to you, get your feedback ahead of kind of more formal consultation on these coming plans. So just kind of a brief input into what's the basis of this particular scenario. So we look to a future where green hydrogen has reached, biomethane has reached the potential of 14 to 15 terawatts, as outlined in the 2023 Bioenergy report. And that green hydrogen has scaled in line with offshore wind development, as kind of outlined in the National Hydrogen Strategy. We've worked closely with TES, with IrBEA's, to base our scenario for power generation on their gas evolution scenario from their Tomorrow's Energy Scenarios, which was published earlier this summer. And this is where we see, I suppose, conventional dispatchable generation currently on methane gradually transition to hydrogen only by 2045. We're also conscious, I suppose, of long-term decarbonisation plans, and we draw on our joint studies with IrBEA's as part of our European obligations for 2050 planning, and factor in, I suppose, the likes of energy efficiency, district heating schemes, and electrification of heat on gas demand, primarily through the SEI's kind of reporting. So I suppose, what does this actually look like in terms of the network? So just to orient you, we give like a very high-level representation of the transmission network. The colours aren't great on the screen, but the navy colour represents methane in the network as it is today. The teal dots represent central injection facilities from biomethane, and the light green is hydrogen, with, I suppose, the concentric circles representing hydrogen hubs that will start at 100% hydrogen. Along the top, I'll talk through at the various stages how demand is going to evolve over the period, and the donuts represent, I suppose, the mix of the gases meeting this demand. We see, I suppose, at the start of the period, we're almost exclusively transporting methane, but over that 20 years, we'll end up at a place where it's a mix of biomethane and green hydrogen on two distinct gas networks. So I suppose just kind of stepping through the stages at a high level. I'm one for the details, so I'll try and step back a small bit. So the first stage is foundation, and that covers from today out to 2027. This period is very much focused on getting renewable gases, in particular biomethane, onto the network as quickly as possible and scaling that up. So the first major project that we are doing to support this is the Mitchelstown Central Injection Facility which is scheduled to come on stream next year. That is our blue teal dot on the map. Just for reference, I suppose, we haven't included our distribution networks here or direct biomethane connections, just for simplicity, but we anticipate the first wave of those direct transmission and distribution connections since Cush to start coming over the next 5 years. To date, we've contracted five additional producers, with another 5 anticipated by the end of the year. So hydrogen, I suppose we're still in the readying phase, and we have a plan and a program of testing, trialing, and planning in order to produce our safety case and to demonstrate to a regulator that we can transport blends from 2% of hydrogen up to 100% safely. We're confident in this. We're drawing on our, I suppose, colleagues in Europe who already are transporting 100% hydrogen networks, and on our own innovation. So as part of the work here, we also have to develop a detailed transition plan. So this is required of us under the National Hydrogen Strategy, and it's looking to transition the network to hydrogen over time, but cognizant of the growing sector and requirement for biomethane in Ireland. So by the end of the period, demand has increased slightly relative to today, and biomethane now is about 700 gigawatt hours, which is over 10 times the volume that we have on the network in 2024. So moving to the second phase, which is development and covers the period from 2028 out to 2032. During this period, renewable gases are really scaling up, particularly biomethane. And I suppose I use the term interchangeably, but the next 10 years is focused on getting as much biomethane onto the network as quickly as possible. So additional CGI facilities will be built, 2 represented here. These are indicative locations, but we were already considering potential sites that make sense from a producer and from a network perspective. And we anticipate, I suppose, a further wave of direct transmission and distribution customers in order to reach that 5.7 terawatt hours of biomethane potential by 2030. On the hydrogen side, this is now starting to emerge with kind of initial blends coming through the interconnectors from the UK, initially kind of 2% by volume. And the, I suppose, emergence of our first hydrogen cluster. The most probable at the moment is the East Cork cluster, the Celtic hydrogen cluster in Cork. And the idea here is a concentration of large unit users being serviced by a repurposed and maybe some new infrastructure in order to, I suppose, create a 100% hydrogen hub. The driving force around hydrogen in the short term is most certainly transitioning our power generation fleet over. So a number of hubs will be in development at the same time, and those are likely clustered around your hubs, so your ports, where you're bringing onshore wind onshore in time, and those power gen locations. So we're also looking at storage options, short-term storage options for hydrogen, but also into the future when we're looking to kind of the long-term requirements for biomethane and hydrogen, appropriate terawatt-hour level storage. So I suppose by the end of the period, demand will have fallen by roughly 15% relative to today, but renewable gas share is growing and growing quickly, with biomethane providing 14% of demand and hydrogen 3% of demand. So I suppose moving to the next phase, which we call repositioning, it's been split into 2 separate stages because it just represents the biggest lift in terms of network flexibility projects. Biomethane grows to 10 terawatt hours per annum at this point and is supported by up to 5 CGIs. We fully appreciate that there is a sustainable limit to the amount of biomethane production in Ireland, but there are ways that we can tweak this up and tweak this down, either through looking at the sustainable supply chain for feedstock, potentially supplementing with hydrogen blends up to 20% on our distribution networks, or as discussed earlier on, methanization of bio-CO2 in order to boost production from those biomethane plants. And that can give an up to 66% boost relative to, I suppose, the ordinary AD process. So I suppose we see a lot more hubs emerging at this time as offshore wind grows. And at this point, we're starting to look at network flexibility projects that will unlock the transition. The most likely being the likes of a Cork-Dublin pipeline, so that we can interconnect these hubs to provide resilience and access to storage. We anticipate that demand will be falling further, and as part of that, we will review our infrastructure just to see what can be repurposed and what can be decommissioned, and we'll do this on a case-by-case basis, relating to areas that might see kind of a dip in gas demand, or if there's kind of a large-scale disconnection by an LEU. So by the end of the period, as I said, biomethane will be able to service 25% of demand, with hydrogen meeting the remaining 15%. So I suppose moving on to the repositioning phase 2, so by the end of the 2030s, we anticipate that the pace of the transition is going to accelerate as we get more offshore wind facilitating green hydrogen via electrolysis. Our biomethane network and saturation is going to maximize. We have this at 14 terawatt hours in this representation, but as I say, can be adjusted up or down depending on the natural limitations that are identified, either from a cost or sustainability perspective. At this point, we could convert one of our interconnectors to the UK, and this will provide us with an import source of hydrogen, provide resilience to the growing hydrogen network, but also provides a means of offsetting some costs from an energy system transition perspective. The availability of an interconnector for import of hydrogen will reduce the need for, I suppose, indigenous storage for hydrogen, according to, I suppose, work identified by TES, by IrBEA's. So I suppose by the end of the period now, demand is at its lowest point. It's down 40% relative to today. However, renewable gases now are the dominant supply point, serving 84% roughly of demand. And that's split roughly 38% from biomethane and 46, if I've done my maths right, from hydrogen. So that leads us now to our final stage, conversion. So the final stage focuses on the whole-scale repurposing of the gas network, displacing those last methane molecules with green hydrogen, creating a hydrogen ring main, and allowing us to split the network into two distinct renewable networks: our hydrogen network, servicing primarily our transition demand, and our biomethane network servicing primarily distribution demand. So biomethane at this time will be able to meet 25 to 30% of Irish gas demand, and we'll have decarbonised 95% of our remaining customers seamlessly with no impact on end users or appliances, whereas hydrogen is targeted to those large power generators and large energy users, and will, I suppose, represent that 70 to 75% demand. At this time, if offshore wind has really taken off as per the government strategy, we may convert our second interconnector to hydrogen, and this will be an energy export vector potentially to Europe via the UK to the European hydrogen backbone. So, I suppose, in conclusion, I hope I've demonstrated over the course of this presentation that the network is ideally positioned to transport renewable gases at scale, and ultimately only renewable gases, and that biomethane can lead the way in the coming decade. The role of the network will change, so we do anticipate lower annual volumes of gas. However, we're providing that flexibility to the electricity system on your low wind, low renewables days, even taking account of increased electrical interconnection and long duration battery storage. So So I suppose in summary, we believe that, look, an integrated approach to energy system planning can maximise just the uptake of our renewable resources, be it biomethane, hydrogen, wind or solar. It can reduce the overall cost and increase our net energy security position and perhaps enable us someday to become a net exporter to Europe and beyond. So thank you very much for your time. There is a 2-minute video on our website that can explain this better than I can do it in 20 minutes, and the full report is there for you to peruse in detail. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. It's very interesting to see the future layout, and I think we all need to be looking at the long-term plans and how we're going to achieve total decarbonisation. And definitely when an entity that's managing such a large infrastructure needs to have those plans laid out and clearly laid out.